Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us. Welcome to the Civil PE Exam Breadth Workshop put on by PE Prepared. This is a series of videos where we're going to go through each of the core subject areas for the NCES Civil PE Exam Breadth module. This is the morning module that every examinee takes. Covers a wide area of subjects. And my hope is that after watching these videos and working through some sample problems, you'll have learned everything that you need to know to pass the exam. So I'll start off by telling everybody a little bit about myself. My name is Mike Ryder, and I will be the instructor for this course. I got my bachelor's degree in civil engineering, and I also got my master's degree in civil engineering. I am a consulting civil engineer. I mostly design water and wastewater systems. And my master's coursework was emphasized geotechnical engineering. So I'm happy to be here teaching the course. I love most of this material. I love learning, and I had a good time studying for the PE exam myself, and hopefully I can pass on that same kind of enthusiasm to you guys. I'll start off by going through our syllabus here. There's going to be 9 core subjects, and we're going to kind of divide our time on each subject area proportional to how the PE exam divides the problems into each subject area. So there are a few more problems in hydraulics and soils than some of the geometrics and other stuff like that. So we're going to start here where the bulk of the exam's content is focused, and then work our way all the way down. First, in this video, I'm going to just talk a little bit about the Civil PE exam itself, answer some common questions, and talk about kind of my analysis of the content of the exam and my recommendations for how to study and how to prepare. So this slide shows the breakdown of the content of the breadth exam. Over on the right, you're going to see a pie chart where I've shown how the questions of the exam will be broken up into each category. The first thing that I would call everybody's attention to is that hydraulics and hydrology has one more question than any other subject area on the exam. It has 7 questions. The next highest number of questions is a tie between soils, structures, and mechanics of materials. But first, if you want to succeed on this exam, I think it's worth your time to step back and learn a little bit about the exam. Don't just dive in and solve problems until you have a good idea of how the exam is going to be structured and what the problems are going to look like so you can best prepare. So this right here is how the exam will be structured. I took this from the exam specifications that are published by the NCES. I would encourage everybody to take a look at them. They're very detailed and very thorough. Besides these 8 core subject areas, there are also various secondary subject areas within each of these 8 core areas. And it's well worth your time to read through it and really understand how many questions might be on what kinds of subjects before you start studying. So as you can see here, the big areas where you need to focus are hydraulics, soils, and materials and structures. That right there is going to make up the bulk of the exam. And then following that, your site development, project planning, and means and methods. Those are all kind of construction type questions really, and then followed up last but not least geometrics, which are your transportation type horizontal and vertical curve questions. So right here you can see exactly how many questions in each subject area there are going to be, and hopefully you can kind of guide your studying so that you focus more on where there's going to be more questions and less on where there will be less questions. Here are some facts about the exam in case you're wondering. So it's broken up into 2 modules. There's going to be the 4-hour, 40-question morning breadth module. That's a multiple choice module that everybody takes. You're going to show up In the morning, you're going to sit down, open your test pamphlet, and you're going to take this morning breath module. Then you're going to stop for lunch, take a quick break, and then come back in the afternoon and take an afternoon depth module. You have a choice, and there are 5 different depth modules that are available for an examinee to choose. So that is also a multiple choice exam. It's also 4 hours. So it's also 40 questions, but it'll get a little more in the weeds on one of these subject areas that you choose. Construction, geotech, structural, transportation, or water resources and environmental. So the whole exam is multiple choice, and for each module you'll have 4 hours to answer 40 multiple choice questions, which comes out to an average of 6 minutes available to you per question. So that's your magic number as you study for this exam. So what does 6 minutes per question mean? 6 minutes per question means that you should be looking at your studying through the lens of 6 minutes per question. If a subject area, such as calculating head loss through a pipe, lends itself very well to a short plug-and-chug question that can be solved in less than 6 minutes, really spend time learning that. If there's some very complicated multi-step type of problem, maybe like soil consolidation, that takes a lot of time. You have to calculate all these pressures here or there and a total and effective stress. Maybe consider that it's unlikely that a question like that will actually be on the exam. It's much more likely that you'll instead be asked some kind of theoretical, conceptual question about soil consolidation. That's just a simple thought experiment that could more reasonably be expected in a 6-minute period. And then about scoring. So a lot of people want to know how the exam is scored. And basically NCES has a complicated scoring procedure where they go through all the questions and do some statistical analysis and all the results of everybody. They throw some questions out and possibly discuss the merits of some questions over others. Nobody really knows what the cut score, the passing score is for any given exam session, but there's a consensus that it's more or less 75%. So that's what you should be aiming for as you study, as you take practice exams. You should be aiming to be in that 80, 85, 90% range, and then you'll do fine because you'll probably get more than 75%. It's important to realize that you don't have to get every question right. You can, probably miss nearly a quarter of the problems and still pass this exam. Let's take a look at this pie chart over on the right here. So I made this pie chart by going through the official NCES practice exam and then categorizing each of the questions as I saw it into one of 3 categories, either plug and chug questions, where you're simply given all of the variables that you'll need in some simple equation except for one. And then you're expected to plug in the variables, solve for the unknown, maybe switch some units around, and boom. You'll see that more than half of the exam, in my opinion, was comprised of plug and chug questions. So I would encourage everyone to really be comfortable with the kind of your plug and chug, get your plug and chug muscles exercising, have that familiarity with your references where you can jump into the civil engineering reference manual, quickly grab the information you need, write out the equation, change some units very quick, do the algebra, solve for the unknown. The next largest chunk of the pie chart here are these conceptual questions. These are going to look like word problems. Oftentimes they have a little graphic accompanying a short paragraph, and it says, which is going to be better, or which is a more favorable condition, or what's going to happen if you take this load off, or what's going to happen if you open this valve. These can be more difficult questions for people, so I think it's important to take a step back from the plug and chug stuff at the end of each kind of subject area and make sure that you understand the core concepts. I'll tell you what these conceptual questions won't be. They won't be like very detailed, nuanced, esoteric, type questions. These are going to be general concepts. I mean, this is going to be just kind of basic, understanding that concrete has higher strength and compression than it does in tension, or having an intuitive feel that the same flow rate in a large pipe and a small pipe will have different velocities, and it will be moving faster in the smaller pipe. These types of questions. Then the final chunk of the pie chart over here is what I call lookup questions. You'll see there's only about 4 questions that I consider lookup questions, and these are really types of questions where you are expected to go to your reference material or the literature and look up some kind of value. An example might be looking up an allowable, maybe a recommended minimum velocity for flow, or a recommended factor of safety for slope stability, or something like that. These questions are really going to rely on depend on what kind of references you have, whether or not you succeed on these types of questions. I do not propose that you bring in a ton of books. Myself, I just brought in the Civil Engineering Reference Manual. And if you take the time to get to know your Civil Engineering Reference Manual and become really familiar with all of the information that is in that book and the appendices, you will have everything that you need to pass the breadth exam with flying colors. The Civil Engineering Reference Manual, you will hear people say that you don't need it or that they didn't buy it. I've spent a lot of time in that book and a lot of time working with the different depth modules, and I will admit that probably it's not as useful for some depth modules as others. It doesn't have a very thorough geotechnical section, and it doesn't have a lot of the information that you would need for the transportation or construction depth modules, but it has everything that you need for the breadth module. So right here you can see know your plug and chug approach. Let's move on. Let's move on to some exam advice. So here I'm just going to quickly go through my main points. The Civil Engineering Reference Manual. You need to buy it. It's your key to success here, and it has everything that you need. It costs a couple $100. It's available from PPI. It's also available on Amazon. I love mine, and it's an extremely useful reference after you've passed the exam and you've moved on and taken your professional practice to the next level. Next is the official NCES practice exam. So this is available from NCES. It's about $40 or $50. And this is your biggest key. This is your roadmap. So the official NCES practice exam is written by the same group of people that develop the questions for the actual exam. If you want to know how hard the actual exam is going to be, I'll tell you it is exactly as hard as the official NCES practice exam. So start your studying with this official practice exam and end your studying with this official practice exam. Take this exam first and see exactly the types of questions that you ought to be familiar with. And don't move on from this practice exam until you can solve every problem in your sleep and you can turn around to your friends and explain every problem. Like truly understand every question in this NCES practice exam before you move on. There are solutions in there. There are references so that you can look up more details. Don't save this for last, like I see a lot of people do. Start with this, and that'll really help give you a feel for what kind of stuff you're going to be expected to know. Next is just really practice solving problems. that's the bread and butter here, 62% of 40, you're going to have 20 or 30 multiple choice problems that you need to just go through and solve quickly. And you need to be familiar with and comfortable. You need to be comfortable doing that, sitting down in one sitting and solving 20 or 30 multiple choice engineering problems. And the best way is practice makes perfect. Next, just kind of some more holistic test-taking strategies. Read the questions carefully. There aren't really trick questions on the exam. I don't think there's any questions that are going to try to purposefully mislead people. But I think there are questions where it's easy to accidentally solve for the wrong thing. There are questions, if you don't read the question carefully, and there are questions where you will be given more information than you need. You might be given the temperature of the water, but you don't even need that to solve the problem. Or you might be given some extra dimensions that you don't need. So just because you're given something doesn't mean you need it. Just read the question and make sure you know what you should be solving for. Also, units. So there's a lot of changing units around with the breadth exam. Be comfortable with that. Be familiar and kind of have a good feel for some of the more commonly used unit conversions. And be sure to give your question, your answer as kind of a reality check. Make sure you're in the right order of magnitude before you move on. And then these next 3 bullets, I would claim that more than half of the exam is supposed to be easy. I think that there are a lot of easy gimme questions on the exam. And then I think that there's a moderate amount of moderately difficult questions. And then there's a small amount of very difficult questions. So you have to get a 75% to pass, right? So miss the hard questions, miss the 4 or 5 hard questions that you had no hope of solving, but don't miss the easy questions. Be familiar with these easy plug and chug questions. Oh yeah, solving for flow through a pipe, easy. Oh yeah, drawing moment diagrams, easy. And then the couple questions that come from left field, you don't have to worry about. You just do your best and go for it, and just be confident with those easy questions. It's going to be a lot of plug and chug questions. You have the advantage with plug and chug questions of being able to kind of manipulate your units, get a feeling for what you need to be doing. You can look up equations and apply them. So don't miss the plug and chug questions. And then also don't waste time. Don't waste time. It's 6 minutes per question. Keep track of where you're at. Don't be spending 10 minutes on the first couple questions, obviously. Just skip them and come back to them at the end. And finally here, as you go through the official NCES practice exam, and as you go through some of the practice exams that are available on the market and other practice problems, recognize the typical patterns. They're all going to be, there's only so many patterns that an examinee could reasonably be expected to solve in 6 minutes. Learn these patterns and learn how to solve these types of questions. Like, oh yeah, this is one of those retaining wall problems. I got my friction angle. I know how to do this. Oh, this is one of those Manning equation problems. They've given me this roughness coefficient. I know how to do this. There's only so many kinds. There's only 40 questions. There's a lot of material that's covered, but there's only so many things that can be asked that can reasonably be solved in 6 minutes. So really pay attention to that as you study, and pay attention to where your strengths and weaknesses are, and try to work on your weaknesses before the exam. Don't ignore them and assume that I never do so well at those soil problems, but maybe there won't be any. No, there will be 6 soils questions. The exam very closely follows the specifications that they publish. So Work on what you need to work on, and you'll do great.